I think that's a big expectation. I know they haven't had the best season, but if you look at their lineup, just take their front three, I think a lot of clubs would have taken them any day. I know more play there could be Kulusevski, but let's say their midfield, Kulusevski, Bentancur, Bissouma, that's a very, 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 very good Premier League midfield. And then I know they haven't had a centre-back, but maybe Gray and Ben Davies played the best defensive game of the season. So Porro is fantastic as right-back. He's got Trent-ish offensive qualities, and Spence have done very well, Kingsley. So we can't expect... If we expect that, then there's something wrong with our fans, or something wrong with... In the Premier League, it's difficult every game.
Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and I think it's fair to say this is going to be a very, very busy week. If you're with us for the very, very first time, where have you been? We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms, we're of course on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're on Blue Sky too. I'm welcoming three, they're regular now, returning guests to Last Word on Spurs, who are dipping their toes into Danish water, maybe? We shall see. We've tried every kind of manager, right? And the next one on the list, I've got to tell you, I am feeling some Frank fever. I spent a lot of my day earlier listening to the High Performance podcast, Thomas Frank. And again, for those I urge to go and watch that Sky Sports documentary, Some Time with Frank. And, you know, you're seeing a gentleman there, a guy that is craving an opportunity. And I did say this at, the previous shows. We shouldn't forget, obviously, what Ange Postecoglou delivered for the football club in a European trophy, giving many out there, some of them the best night of their lives. But football does move fast, and like Tottenham, it comes at you like a train. Let's bring three into the group that have been on that train at times, but they might have been run over during the season. I've got the wonderful Jim from Oso Spurs joining me. Jim, how are you? It's got the makings of a busy week.
Doing well, thanks. Yeah, I've got my Viking hat on order, so it'll be sat behind me from next week, hopefully, to accompany a replica Europa League trophy. So, yeah, I'm good. I'm feeling very good.
Jim, love to be back on here. Also back on the show, it's that charismatic guy. It's Ash over at Spurs Kings. Ash, it's your wake-up time. It's becoming a regular time for us now. How are you? Lovely to see you.
I'm just wondering, Ricky, when I can get on the intro. I'm just saying, but
well, we are changing the intro up. I promise you, Ash. We are changing the intro up. We've had a lot more cast members throughout the course of the season because we've killed off half of them through what's been the last 18, 19 months. So look, don't get me wrong, a lot more cast members coming through. We're working on it, Ash. It's now in a very much big production line once we get through this week because it feels like it's gonna be a big week, Ash.
Love, bro. But yeah, listen, I'm saying Postecoglou walked, so Thomas Frank could run. That's what I'm going to start with.
Jesus, what a start that is. I tell you. That's what I thought was coming out of the wonderful Jonny Hamme's mouth. Jonny, love to be back on here. It feels like I say it's a big week for the football club, big week for the fan base. A lot has happened in the last couple of weeks, right, to process.
Listen, I'm actually buzzing. I mean, I spent so many times on here talking about defeats, poor Ange. It was just so negative, and it's just great to actually come on finally and feel the energy. I mean, it's been an up and down time since Bilbao. We had the euphoria then of the victory, then we had the parade, more euphoria, then the doubt about Ange, then he's gone, then Frank comes in, or Frank if we were trying to give him a little sexier name, Thomas Frank, and then the fan base goes into a meltdown, but now it's sort of calmed down. They've done a bit of digging, a bit of diving, and they say, hey, you know what? This guy ain't bad. And for me, I've got to be honest with you, I'm so excited because I've followed this guy, for a number of years. And I always really liked him, but I really never thought that he would be Spurs manager. I'm not sure why. I just thought that he wouldn't be accepted by the Spurs fan base, but I'm really excited for him. It's the chance that he deserved. He's looked at Man U. He's been on the list of other top 6 clubs. Not that right now we're top 6, we're top 17, but I think this could be a start of a interesting period for the club.
Absolutely. It's always an interesting period, right? Because obviously Daniel Levy has had this will be number 14 of the managers in the last 24 years. And Daniel Levy has got the 155th time to get it right. So, look, I will just say again, for those out there, I would encourage and implore you, there's a lot of great content on Thomas Frank online, where you can get some really, really good interviews on what that guy is about, his mantra, his beliefs. And it doesn't mean because, one man has gone, you forgot what that man has delivered. But at the same time, what is lying in wait for Tottenham, I think, is potentially a really, really exciting coach. I know for some, when that was first mentioned about Thomas Frank, there was a feeling that, is he a mid-table manager? I mean, if you do your digging and you look at this guy as really, evolved in time over his career, he's been waiting for a massive, massive opportunity. And Tottenham for him is a massive, massive chance at a club with, let's be honest about it, the structure, you've got to work through and work under. It's not the most easiest club to deal with. So look, before we do get into all that, I'm going to bring everybody an update of where we are with Tottenham's pursuit of Thomas Frank. I want to say already, thank you ever so much for all your incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. My wife knows this is coming, so I'm going to say it. This is going to be a very, very busy week on Last Word on Spurs. I'm going to urge you and tell you, in order so you don't miss any of the action, I'm not one that always drives you mad to hit like, hit subscribe. I'm going to tell you, hit the like button, share this out to a worldwide Spurs audience, and do hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of content we're bringing you over the course of this next week on Last Word on Spurs. And all I can say is, God help my marriage, because it's going to be a very testing period. Let's bring you up to what Tottenham's pursuit is of Thomas Frank as of right now. Tottenham are closing in on sealing the appointment of Thomas Frank as the club's new head coach. There is positivity and optimism that a deal for Frank, who is understood to want to join Spurs and hopes to take a number of his backroom staff with him to Tottenham, can be struck. There is a total agreement between Tottenham and Frank on the project, salary, length of contract, budget, positions, and players to target. And it is now only a short matter of time before he will sign on the dotted line to become Tottenham Hotspur's head coach. We understand Spurs are prepared to pay that release clause in his current contract with Brentford, which is understood to be in the region of 10 million. And the talk between the two clubs are ongoing, with the focus on that level of compensation required for members of Frank's staff to follow him to Tottenham. Now, sources with knowledge of the situation believe it's been positive communication throughout the whole process. Frank has most importantly agreed personal terms, but more importantly, I think it's a real key one from what we've heard, did want guarantees about how the club would operate with him in charge. And that's been one of the key things they have been working out over the last few days. And quite interestingly, what's being reported is that the former Brentford boss will not have the final say on every deal, which is probably as expected, but he does want to be part of the process, and Spurs have reportedly agreed to that. I know many out there are probably saying, for what that's worth. In terms of a timeline, we understand Frank informed Brentford over the weekend that he wanted to leave the football club for Tottenham, and that has seen talks accelerate over this last 24, 48, 72 hours. We understand for Tottenham, on the shortlist of the role that they were looking to bring somebody in, on that was Andone Iraola, Roberto De Zerbi, and also Marcus Silva. Tottenham were understood that Iraola was happy to stay at Bournemouth. The same applied for Roberto De Zerbi at Marseille. And quite interestingly, as Johnny said in his intro there, Thomas Frank was actually as part of a shortlist for both Chelsea, where he had an interview, and he was also long-term admired by Manchester United. And we understand Daniel Levy has played a real crucial role in the arrival of Frank and has convinced him to make the switch. Now, Brentford did hope to tie down Frank to a new deal. However, a crucial meeting was understood to have taken place between Levy at his house a fortnight ago, in which him and Frank spoke prior to that. And it is believed the latest round of talks has been absolutely key in making that decision for the Dane that Tottenham is the right club for him. Let's start with you, Jim. It's been a whirlwind week. It could come, this announcement, at any time. How excited are you for the arrival of Thomas Frank as the club's new head coach?
I am excited. Yeah, and like everyone said on here, as you lift the hood and you get to understand the person, I think everyone started a little bit underwhelmed was the initial reaction, wasn't it? It was, oh, this guy's in a club that's around the mid-table of the Premier League, we should be going for something more exciting. But I think it's important to understand the journey someone's gone to get that opportunity like Frank has. And his is an interesting journey, and he has quite deservedly earned his spot. And I think what's a compliment to Spurs is he's been picky. He could have left Brentford sooner. He's had opportunities to go to other jobs. Brentford fans will tell you if you ask them, he's linked to every vacancy that comes up, and for good reason. But he's waited for a club that he feels can offer him the squad he believes in, a youth development centre that he feels is world-class, because that's where his strengths are, and he wants to work with that, and we offer that in buckets. And we need a manager who can address our club-grown and homegrown issues by really kind of building on our young players. I feel like, yes, some people will feel we've gone from the Australian manager version of Evel Knievel in Ange. He was a trendsetter. He loved the risks, and it was exciting for a lot of us to be on that journey, to someone who maybe is more leaning towards circumspection, right? He's a bit more sensible in that sense. But I feel we've had so many extremes of Spurs. Conte is a maverick in how he coaches. Jose's a maverick in how he coaches. Ange is a maverick in how he coaches. They're all unique individuals. And I think what we need now as a club is some stability. And when I say that, I don't paint it as, oh, mid-table stability. He's just Mr. Average. Not by any means at all is he like that. I think there's value in being a manager who looks at the tried and the tested, looks at the best variations of the tried and the tested, takes them and becomes extremely good at executing them. Because at the end of the day, if you want to win trophies, you are more likely to win if you can consistently put in strong performances, and it's a game of averages, and you will get there. And I think that's what Frank's going to bring to us. He's going to take us on a tactical journey as fans that we will be able to relate to and understand, and he will be able to explain to us. Whereas I feel in the past, not too distant time ago, we've had lots of managers that have left us scratching our heads with their substitutions, their mindsets, what they're thinking about with lineups. And that's been quite frustrating. I think what you sometimes look for is when you're 2 goals down, come on, bring on another striker. You don't need to overcomplicate it sometimes. And I think Frank will look at the data as well. I like managers who are data driven because they're modern, they're forward thinking, and Frank certainly is one. And the other final good thing is I don't think it's going to be I don't like the term rebuild. I don't think this is a rebuild. I think this is continuation of the building projects that we've started under Ange Postecoglou. And look, I was a fan of Ange, and I'd have been interested to see season 3. But when you reflect and you take a step back, you've got to say the club did what we asked. They took emotion out of things. And they've taken a decision as a collective, not as one individual at the top of the tree, to do what they feel best maximizes the value out of the squad we've got, the budget we've got coming into the season. We're not going to be heavy on cash unless we get this external investment. And I think Frank is perfect for all those things. And yes, don't put too high expectations on him in season 1, but don't be surprised if he does over exceed on your expectations in season 1.
I love those words there, Jim. And I think, it's for many out there, I've seen there's a wave now slowly of real excitement with regards to what is coming Tottenham's way. And Ash, to bring you in, quite interestingly, back in August 2024, Frank revealed that he believed he had one of the best jobs in the world at Brentford, and stressed that the work environment at the West London club was so good. Something which many may question at Tottenham with regards to how that structure is going to exactly work. I mean, this is a guy that has come from a model where, with all due respect, there's total trust, there's total faith in terms of all those people and what they're being built in to do as a group. How important is that, given how quickly this is accelerated? It does feel that Frank is a smart man. I think if you go and listen and watch this man talk, he knows his football, he knows his journey. It says a lot that he's decided, I think, to pick Tottenham because, like John and Jim have rightly said, he has been courted by a number of high-profile clubs, and it looks like Tottenham are going to look to get their man.
Yeah, it's an interesting question you posed there, because at Brentford, Thomas the Frank engine had a beautiful environment, a lovely culture, a good structure is the word that you used, Ricky. And I'm looking at Tottenham Hotspurs as a bigger club. It's going to be a lot more pressure, more eyes on him, more the environment has been questioned by lots of Spurs fans in terms of our hierarchy and how we're run. Is Thomas Frank a good manager which his ceiling was improved because of his environment and because of the structure behind him. It's a really well-run club, Brentford. Jim's already mentioned about how they use data and how Thomas, he likes to extract data to kind of work on his team and get the best out of what he has at his disposal. He's not a diva. He's not someone that's going to sniff at, particular tools that are given to him. He's someone that's going to get any type of player he feels he can work with, and he's going to try and get the best out of them. And we've already mentioned, his ability to improve the youth. So at the under 16s level in Denmark, he was their national team manager. And at the under 17s level, he was their manager as well, developing under 23s. And then also at under 18 and under 19 level, he was also the Danish manager there. So he's got an eye for talent and working with the youth. And then he's even at Brentford, when he was at Brentford, he had to develop under 23s, such as Lewis Potter, as I said before. We've looked at Wisa, Mbuemo when they were 23. They've come to the club. He's developed them. There's also other midfielders as well, like Mbuemo, when he was quite young, he came and he developed. So he's got a track record of developing young players. Even David Raya, when he came, he was 23 as well, or under 23, helping him to develop his game. And so you look at Langer worked with him before in Denmark, and the club he worked for him was, I think it was called Langby's the name of the club. He worked for him, and together they formed that relationship. And even outside of that, 20 years ago, they still had kept in contact. They still speak regular. And so this was definitely a Langer appointment. And Langer, his job role was to work with the data, was to help develop or bring through the under 23s, as you're seeing with players that Thomas Frank actually wanted. Looking at Archie Gray, someone he really wanted to work with. Brennan Johnson, actually, he's one that he wanted to bring into Brentford. You look at players like Lucas Bergvall, Scandinavian. He's another midfielder that he's going to want to work with. Who's under 23, can develop. Then you've got players like Odebert, who's quite young as well. He's an under 23 international for France. And you're seeing players that we haven't quite got yet, but maybe Tell, who played for us last season, he was on loan, and the club are looking to, maybe negotiate and do some deals with that. But we're probably trying to get over the Thomas Frank deal at the moment. But just to put things into context, last season, Brentford were the 5th highest goal scoring team. So a lot of people are saying, Brentford are very pragmatic. You can't be that pragmatic if you scored, you've got the 5th highest scoring team in the league. Yeah. Also, where they scored the goals was quite important. Centrally, I think they were the 2nd highest team to score goals in the central area. So they scored 72% of their goals in that particular area, which I think is an important note, because when you're looking at the front three, compared to what Ange had, he had his wide players playing wide and high. And I think with Thomas Frank, I keep saying Frankfurt, with Thomas Frank, he likes to play his front three a lot closer to the box. Hence why we're seeing a lot higher percentage in terms of him scoring goals. So we're going to see players like Johnson in the pockets or the half space in between the lines. You're going to see Madison as well, more in that kind of attacking midfielder role. You're going to see whoever plays on the left next season, because we know Son's linked to Saudi. I don't know if it's his last season, now that he's achieved what he wanted to do, which is win a trophy of the cup. But whoever plays out wide on the left, you can see them maybe operating more centrally, and that will allow room for one of the fullbacks to get up and down. Now, I would assume we play a lot more pragmatic, so not always having the fullbacks ultra high. But again, the option would be there, so they wouldn't be in each other's way and they wouldn't be crowding out each other's spaces. So tactically, we are seeing a bit of a shift, like what Jim has said, and I'm sure Johnny's going to touch on, in terms of when he first came into the league, he played a 3-5-2 with with Tony and then Mbuemo up top. But he's also worked for players like Ollie Watkins. Ollie Watkins used to play underneath him. I said Wisa before, and Lupe as well. So he's had different forwards to work with that he's had to get the best out of and adapt his system. So the only thing, like you were saying, Ricky, which is a slight issue or something we could put a question mark under, is obviously he hasn't played in Europe. So we will see how
I think he's had, from what I understand, I think he's had 10 or 8 Euro per qualifying games. You're right. He hasn't played in Bromby. He has played in Europe, but obviously not in the actual competition itself, but has played in the qualifying round. I mean, I agree with you, Ash, that he's saying that obviously some may be worried about, but all I would say is maybe to give some confidence. Some might not think it's confident given the nature of the campaign, but you have to remember, I think Pochettino in his first Champions League, or in one of his second Champions League campaigns, he guided the club all the way to the final. So I'm not sure how important that is in regards to it being a massive, massive question mark. But you're right, Ash. I think it's definitely something that maybe some would be concerned about. But I think the most important thing is he's been managing the Premier League, right? And he's been playing against the best teams. And I
was going to add on, like, one of his mentors or one of his coaches that was an assistant coach to him in the Danish league was a coach. I forget his name, but he's coached at Barcelona, their academy level, and he helped assist Thomas Frank in developing his coaching style. So also as well, his mentor and / coach, he also was a mentor for Iniesta. So, he's still got that European philosophy, that style that's been taught to him by a UEFA top Barcelona academy manager as well. And so I'm not going to say that, some of these things people aren't aware of that, Thomas has got in his locker. So I'm not going to poo-poo him because he hasn't played in Europe. But I'm just making the point that obviously he hasn't played twice a week. Yep. And then even when it comes to press conferences, he hasn't had a room full of journalists where he's going to be scrutinized every game, and he's going to have a lot longer to speak. And let's see how he deals with that type of pressure.
Of course. I mean, John, just on that point there, I think it's really important, because I just said it, and you've actually, I know, said this before, he's had the likes of Watkins, Benrahma, Eriksson, Tony, Raya. They were all absolute huge losses to his Brentford side, and yet he adapted, he improved without them, he showed that versatility. And, again, he's really, I think he had that one season at Brentford where I think they were 16th, 17th. They weren't, you'd say, fighting relegation. They weren't where they wanted to be, but there's been a upward trajectory from Frank in his reign at Brentford, which again leads to the point where I think you've said it as well. He feels he's deserving of a big chance. It looks like that big chance will be at Tottenham.
I mean, listen, I've been watching Thomas Frank now for just over 5 years. My friend has a player there, Josh Da Silva at Brentford. So that's how I ended up starting to watch them. And what amazed me about Thomas Frank was, as soon as he lost the player or he got ravaged by injury, you'd go to watch him again in the next game, and to get over the loss, instead of maintaining the same tactic that he had regardless and just put square pegs in round holes, he changed the entire system. And what sometimes would happen was it would take them 2, 3, even 4 games before that they could get used to that system. Then they'd go on a run again. There's a reason why they call him the professor, because he studies everything in minute detail, basically minute detail. And it's the detail that makes the difference. We talk about, set piece coaches. This was something that was extremely important to Thomas Frank. Unfortunately, they lost their main set piece coach to Arsenal. We can see what he's been doing with their set pieces, throw-ins and things like that. Every little thing that he can do, looking at how to nullify teams. You see, it's very difficult for a manager like Thomas Frank, because he has to be pragmatic in the sense to not get hammered each week, but he has to install a confidence and a belief in the team that they can actually at the same time go and win it. And it's that balance which is really difficult, and I don't think people appreciate. I've seen him play 3 at the back, 4 at the back, 5 at the back. I've seen him play 1 up, 2 up. The interesting stat is, in all the 4 years that he's been at Brentford in the Premier League, he's never once been in the bottom 3. which is quite an amazing stat. And the fact that he's got the second lowest budget, I think he's punching. I think that, the fact that, he looked at players like Archie Gray and Johnson prior to them coming to us, and another player, was it Noosa, who he couldn't get hold of because he failed his medical, but he's going on now and he's doing very well. What we have here is a hands-on coach who's going to be on that training ground with his team, improving every aspect. The other thing is with him, I hear people talk about data. He's very much an eye test, first and foremost, but the data comes when he's trying to put a point across to a player. So, for example, if he's looking at a player either in a game or in training, and he thinks, well, hang on a minute, are my eyes deceiving me? And then he asks for the data on video or the monitor which they're wearing. He will then take that to the player to show them, look, this is what's happened. You're not doing it. He won't suffer fools gladly. He's a nice guy, but he won't suffer fools gladly. And someone, for example, like Brennan Johnson, I'm not sure he's going to tolerate him checking back on the flanks. He wants Brennan Johnson to be brave, take players on. And by taking players on, you're going to win free kicks. You're going to commit players, create space for others. That's what Brian Mbuemo does. I mean, I remember when I first saw Brian Mbuemo, I was so excited by him. But the one problem that he had was his finishing. And it's something he's worked on tirelessly, along with his fitness. I don't think he missed a game this season for them. And I just think that, I don't want to go down the Ange, saying something disrespectful to Ange, but what I didn't understand with Ange is how he never took a team of coaches with him. He was quite happy to take a seat. He got Montgomery and his friend from Hibernian after they got sacked. I'm going to teach you my philosophy, and then you're going to go onto the pitch and tell the players. That, for me, doesn't work. That's my opinion. I prefer, when you look at someone like Ancelotti, got the same, because you look at Conte, works with the same people. You look at Pochettino. They understand every aspect of his coaching and his drills. And that's why I think we cannot make the same mistake as we made with Nuno. When Nuno came to Spurs and he asked to bring his coaching staff and his number 2, and Daniel said no. This time, he's adamant that he wants to bring his guys with him. Another one of the little tricks that he did, I remember, was this thing that he did at the start of the game with his one of his coaches and tacticians, was to press in the opening 5 minutes to score a goal. I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the season, they were scoring goals.
Yes,
first minute, second minute, third minute. They were really going at them. So they would always look to that minute advantage. And I think there's a couple of things that he mustn't do. I think he can't go into that changing room and get a massive hard-on for the players that he's got there in comparison to what he's had. He's going to walk in there and thinking, oh, my God, I've got a massive riches. But he must not look at that thing and say, you know what, I'm happy with my lot. Because we all know as fans that this squad isn't good enough to maintain a run in the Champions League and a run at the, in the Champions League and the league. So he's going to need to demand the players. We'll no doubt talk about the ones that he looks at. The one thing I worry about, if I'm honest, when he took over at Bromby, I know what you're going to say. He lost 8 games on the trot. And I was there when he took over from Dean Smith. Yeah. The people saying, this kid's really good. This manager, I think he's going to be a good manager. And I can't remember. I think he lost 9 or...
Well, 8. He lost 8 of the first 10.
Is that for Brentford, wasn't it?
For Brentford, yeah. Yeah, he lost. Yeah. I mean, listen, the thing, you'd like to think, Johnny, and let you come back on this point. Yeah. You'd like to think that with what he's got the caliber to at Tottenham, we're not going to worry. But the reality is that we know, I mean, you might argue on the back of the previous manager winning a European trophy, there may be an argument that he is going to need a fairly decent start to get maybe some on board that aren't maybe as positive as what we all three appear to be with Thomas Frank, because I think we can all take a step back, and when you've listened and you've watched a lot of the documentaries on him, this is the most important point, Jonny. He's waited a long, long time for this moment. And what I mean by that, he's waited a long, long time to be given an opportunity at a Big Six club. And Tottenham are, forget the league position of last season, Tottenham are a traditional Big Six club. They are. Everyone knows Tottenham are a traditional Big Six club. So I think for him, what is exciting me is by the fact of how much it appears he wants to be here. And I really do want to believe, like every manager that steps through the door at Tottenham, when you get those first quotes from Thomas Frank, everyone's going to really fall in love with the guy. And I really do believe that, because when you listen and watch him, and the biggest thing of all, Jonny, you said there about the players, you know, the one thing I loved in all of his opening intros has been the fact he kept saying it, we've got a no dickhead policy here. You know, I do not tolerate players that come here, are disrespectful to my coaching staff, have got a don't care attitude. I want people that want to be here, want to win, want to work, want to focus. And that is exactly what I think as fans we all want to see, Jonny.
Does that mean Garnacho's out then?
Listen, on that point,
I think. Listen, I think the problem here is that we had a manager that came here, and the news from Celtic and from Japan was that he starts slow. We have to give him time, and that's all we heard before he kicked a ball, before he did anything. Yeah. And it was a big shock. He was unbeaten, 1-8. Drawn 2, unbeaten in 10 games. I do worry that if Thomas starts and he loses 2 or 3 and he wins 2 or 3, oh, here we go. Right. And I worry that they're going to round on him.
No, do you know what? I honestly do believe, on that point, Jonny, I know there might be that concern there, but I do think people, when they hear those initial quotes, which I promise you guys, they can't be too far away. We're going to get this announcement very, very soon. I think many people are going to warm to this guy. He's got, maybe he's not for everybody. I have to say this, Ange had a certain aura about him that many love that aura. And I know Jim has spoken about that a lot on this show, about the way in which he did bring the players with him for that final and attracted the players. But the reality is that Thomas Frank's got his own type of aura. And the reality is that, when you look at the journey he's taken at Brentford, he's deserving of this chance. I think that's really important, Jonny. We mentioned that before we go.
I was going to say that, I know. I knew this was happening a while back, but I was just going to say that he has made demands, right? He didn't take Man United because there were certain aspects that didn't appeal. He would have laid his groundwork and his framework, should I say, for what he would expect and what he would want. He knows what he's going into. You haven't been at a club for 7 years. Remember, he's the second longest serving manager after Pep Guardiola. And when you think that how many managers have lost their jobs in the last 4 years in bigger clubs than him and lesser clubs than him, and still he's standing there, he knows what he needs to step up. He knows what's going to be asked for him. But at the same time, he has the right to expect certain things from Tottenham Hotspur, and whether or not, he would have asked. He's, as you mentioned before, he's been told the budget, he's demanded his team, and I'm really looking forward to Frank and Spence.
Love that. Listen, we're going to go for our first break of our show for our listeners on audio. Let's take a look, as Jonny has alluded to there, and the boys have alluded to, Thomas Frank hands-on in action. Let's see Frank showing a bit of demand from his players. We're going to go for our first break. Here is the man in action on that coaching ground.
Yes! Good. I like it, Frank. Brilliant. Yes! React! It's fine. A little bit higher, V. A little bit higher, so on the outside. You need a bounce, yes, okay. Time. Yes. Brilliant, Miles, Brian. Now we're there. Okay, let's go. Out, Vita. Yes. Better. Now we played a little bit more on the outside. And here where you went down there, where Chris, he just needs to go higher, okay? So we fill in, but really good. So get those positions. So make sure, for example, the outside in the back three, whoever that is, make sure we are high enough so we can take the ball forward. Then we have a back four who's defending. So we can make the breakthrough. We can attack 6 versus 5. If we lose it, we defend 4 versus 5. Love it, Wes! Play! Frankie, perfect position for the bounce, okay? Really, really good.
There you go. That's the man in action. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. We've got over nearly 12,000 of you that are watching the show live. Thank you so much, as always, for your incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. I'm going to say it, guys. As I said at the start of the show, we've got a very, very busy week in store on Last Word on Spurs. You aren't going to want to miss what is coming your way. Please keep liking. Please keep subscribing. And you know what? We have touched upon Frank the person, what he's going to be up against, who may he need to come in and help him on this journey, because I think this is the fascinating point too. We're going to go to Jim to get his take on the latest speculation with regards to who may be joining Thomas Frank at Tottenham. We understand, as things stand at the moment, that it is described as highly unlikely that Tottenham hijack Manchester United's bid for Bryan Mbuemo. Mbuemo is understood to be waiting for Manchester United as his priority. Frank is close to Spurs, so we will see what happens if he joins. But at the moment, Bryan Mbuemo is waiting to see what happens with regards to Manchester United. Another name that has entered the fray in the last 24 hours is that of Antoine Semenyo. We understand Spurs have been stepping up their interest, but once again, Man United are in the frame. They are also admirers of the player, despite their bid for Bryan Mbuemo. Now, Man United remain the admirers of him, and like I say, they are pursuing, as things stand, both players. Semenyo hasn't ruled out moving to Manchester United, but the key of this is that he believes, for him, he wants to be playing in the Champions League, something that Tottenham can offer, and it's an interesting situation brewing between these two players who I'm referring to and these two clubs, something to keep an eye on. Another name that has been thrown around in the last 24 hours that could potentially be a Tottenham player down the line that Frank also likes is that of Nathan Collins. There are reports that Frank would like to potentially bring Nathan Collins with him to Tottenham. I just wonder, Jim, on these points we're seeing here with players being linked that he's been respectively working with, I mean, how tricky is that going to be? Because you're taking Frank, you're going to take a number of the coaching staff. Do you think it's going to be even harder on that basis, Jim, to try and prize away any players that he's been working with at Brentford?
I don't think it will make it too much harder. You could look at it as if he's leaving Brentford on very amicable terms, even though it's a business and they've got to protect their own business, they might see this as an opportunity to cash in on players that Frank would value above what other managers who don't know these players as well, and that his replacement can use that budget to shape their own team based on what they need. Frank does have some really big decisions to make, though, doesn't he, when he comes in regarding these transfers, because we know that Spurs have around £220 million in liquidity right now, but they owe £188 million in transfer payables in the season coming. So that significantly whacks that. But then Spurs do have a £50 million HSBC credit facility they can pull down. So we've got money to spend, but we have to look at players and targets where typically you're going to defer the majority of the payments into the second and third and fourth season and not pace heavily up front. So that kind of takes players that people have spoken about, like Eze, out of the equation in the immediate now, unless we are willing to sell some of our other players. Now, I think we all know the biggest question is he's walking into a dressing room with the club captain being the biggest legend at the club, probably in the last 20 years, in son Heung-Min. And he's a player who would likely want to stay playing in the Premier League. And I think from what we've heard, he would, preferentially like to stay in the top 5 league. He's still got it in him to compete at that level. But Spurs, at the same time, need cash if they want to really address 4 or 5 positions that they need. So he's going to have to make a big call on that, because he could easily force Son's hand by saying, you're not going to be in our bloated Champions League squad. But what kind of precedent does that set as the new guy walking into a dressing room absolutely buzzing off the back of a trophy? So his man management skills are going to be pretty important in those first weeks. And that is a really tough one for him to manage. But what I would say is, yes, we do need a right winger. And I think that's why, we're linked to those players. But Man United are a pain, aren't they? They're like someone at an auction when you see you want something and you're going to get it for a really sensible price, and they just start bidding against themselves and driving the price up for absolutely no reason. And you can tell they're absolutely broke and all their money is inherited and they have no idea how to use it properly. but they just ruin it for everyone else because, we'll walk in and offer someone 80 grand who's on 40 grand a week and they'll just go 200. Why do you didn't even need to do that? What are you doing? And I think that's kind of what's happening with some of the players we come in against. But the good news is it's good to see they haven't changed, and long may it continue as they dig their hole deeper and deeper under their own circumstances. Very good situation though for us is I don't think you can put a price on the likes of Gray and Berryvale having experienced what it takes to win a trophy and walking into a dressing room where your young players have had that level of exposure to a first team. Some will say that was due to man management. Some will say that was due to Forster injuries. Whatever your opinion, he has been left with a foundation where a lot of fringe players have gained a lot more exposure and left him with probably a stronger squad than he would have been if Spurs hadn't had their challenges last season that saw them 17th in the league. So, yeah, I do think he's got work to do in the transfer window, though. I do think he needs a right winger, and I think he should be sensible in the same way that most managers are and get those first 2 transfers right.
Yep.
Go for what you know. Go for players respect you. You know what value you're going to add to your system. You can see the gaps in yours, and if you know they can fix it, bring him in. They're not the ones to take a risk on. So yeah, I hope we give him the budget to bring in a winger and a number 6. And that back up another centre-back, even though they've extended Davies' contract. I think we need that as a minimum, just to give them that foundation. But lastly, I think Frank's still going to have to prioritise competitions, and it's going to be fascinating to see what he does. He's got to focus on the league because we all know that any manager right now will have the pressure of needing to get back into those European spots. It's what will give him more transfer budget into the following seasons and allow him to build a competitive squad. But if you had to pick one other competition, what would it be? I mean, Europe's our history, but the Champions League will be the hardest one to win. It's going to be fascinating to watch because I think he's a smart man and he will prioritize some over the others. And I kind of hope because it's our history, I hope it's the Champions League and I hope it's the Premier League. And you never know. It's a cup competition. Maybe we could do something special with a tactical manager like him.
Well, listen, he's got the opportunity his first game to win a cup. I know we have some previous games before that, but look, if he goes and beats PSG, God help us, we'll be on top of the world, but we'll be trying to climb down. I mean, life hits you fast as a Tottenham fan. You can have 2 trophies in the space of 5 months after waiting 17 years for 1. Only Tottenham could do this to you. Actually, I think really important what Jim said there about the way in how Frank and Langer and the backroom team of Parachi is going to come in at some point. I think important to add this on Parachi at the moment. I think Johnny will maybe add some more on his background and understanding of it as well. I think what we're led to believe at the moment with regards to Fabio Parachi is that there has been some interest in him from the Middle East, but he's understood still to be keen on rejoining Tottenham. But the biggest issue at the moment is that there is a potential court trial down the line, which is at the moment stopping the potential return of him imminently. It's something I think Tottenham want in the future, near future, but how quick that can happen, we're not too sure. And they've obviously got Vinay Venkatesham obviously on board now, CEO. Just how important will it be, Ash? You touched on it earlier. Those, what we say now, opening weeks of the window, because we're already, to some degree, playing catch up. Frank, we haven't got him through the door yet. There's been talk that we've agreed on the salary, we've agreed on the length of the contract, we've agreed on the potential targets that they're looking at. Really important that the club deliver for him what he is understood to need to be able to do this job to the best of his ability in that first season, right, and beyond.
Yeah, if Paratici can stay on, that would be an absolute bonus because you've got Paratici. He's the one that kind of secures the deals. He's got good experience in doing that. And we know that he's got a lovely book full of contacts. So he's able to talk to agents. He's able to have that liaisons and get those deals over the line. So the two could work hand in hand because Langer, he's more of the data guy. Whereas you got Paratici, he will look at the player and then together, all 3 of them with Thomas Frank will sit down and they decide on the player. But looking at some of the players we're linked with, I'm happy that they're of a certain age now. So we're looking at players that are 23, between 23 and 28, I'd say. So we're looking for players that are more experienced at this level. What we need when we're going into that Champions League level, we need players that can hit the ground running, that know the league as well. I think that's important. And some people do feel that, Son has been on a bit of a decline, especially season just passed. I think his numbers haven't been as impressive as seasons have gone by. He has achieved what he's needed to achieve in terms of winning that cup, winning that trophy. So I do wonder if they are starting to look at that left-hand side, because on the right, potentially you have Brennan Johnson on the right-hand side, Odobert, who has been deployed on that right-hand side quite a bit when he was fit. And Kulusevski, I know he's out, he's injured, so he won't be starting at the start of the season. However, he has also been deployed on the right-hand side as well. So you've got 3 players potentially that can play on that right-hand side. I even had a small spell. I think it was one game he played on the right. But need I say, I think if Son has a question mark on him on that left-hand side, I'm not sure what's going to happen with Mikey Moore, if he's going to go out on loan or if we're going to keep him. I'm not too sure. But in terms of, as I said before, in terms of players with experience going into that Champions League, I like the look of a player like a Semenyo if Mbuemo is not available. Johnny's already mentioned it, with Mbuemo, his shooting numbers weren't too high when he first came to the league, and something that's worked really hard on, and he's improved on those numbers. And you've seen last season he had his best season. I think he scored like 21 goals in the league, 15 non-penalty goals, quite impressive. And I look at Semenyo in a similar kind of mold. I think the trajectory for Semenyo could be just as good as Mbuemo, if not better, because he's played on the right-hand side for Bournemouth. He's also played on the left, and he's also played as a false 9 or in a 10. So he's played across the whole front 3. If you look at the traits of a Semenyo, it's very physical. He's got a good upper body strength when he does carry that ball up the pitch. Very strong in possession in terms of dribbling, taking his man on, going on the outside, on the inside. I've seen him centrally do little pirouettes to take 2 or 3 players on and take players out the game. His shot volume is really high. But when I was looking to compare his shots on target, they're not as in line with how many shots he takes, meaning there is room for improvement in terms of his finishing. And he spoke about this, Thomas Frank. I can't remember what podcast or what interview it was, but he talked about players and where they shoot from in terms of scoring the goals. And they call it XG in the data. Some people like it, some people don't. But essentially, expected goals. Do you have a greater chance of finishing that goal? Do you have a greater chance of finishing that shot? And people argue it depends on the player. Now, when Thomas Frank was talking, he was like, some players, when they get to the central zone, they will be on their weaker foot and they will try to shoot, and it doesn't quite come off. Semenyo's ambidextrous, so he can shoot off either foot. But if you're slightly off balanced and you go for a shot, then maybe that's not the best option to do. And he's explaining that. Thomas Frank's breaking that down, the nuances in terms of when to shoot, where to shoot. And you're seeing players like Wisa, that, like Johnny had already said, fans weren't rating Wisa at all when he first came to the Brentford. And now he's had an exceptional season alongside him in Mbuemo. And that's because of the coaching of Thomas Frank. So if we were to get someone like a Semenyo who can get inside that box, start taking shots, maybe not from outside, but inside those crucial areas, his goal ratio will go high up. And he got 11 goals last season at Bournemouth and 5 assists. So that's 16 goals contribution. But what I do like about Mbuemo is that he's able to hold onto the ball, and we need players that can, with Semenyo, he likes the balls from deep in that defensive third, and we need players that can give us possession in that defensive third when we're building up, because a lot of the time Spurs do lose the ball in possession in those areas, and it stops our control of the game, it stops our attacks and our ability to swing momentum. And that's really important in football, because once you've got the ball, you get hold of it, the crowd goes up. And also Thomas Frank spoke about this as well, the importance of the crowd, the role they play, and these little things you do with players that help to get the fans on their feet. And I thought I was quite impressive by him. So this area for me, I would say left wing, but I like Semenyo because he can offer that left wing central role and the right wing area that Mbuemo has played on that right hand side. So for me, yeah, I like the look of Semenyo.
How important, Jay, to come over to you on that point? I can see you're interested to come in. How important for you is the aspect of that recruitment in this first season for Frank, giving him those players that are going to be absolutely crucial to being part of the bigger jigsaw, right? Because I think what we saw, for those that saw the intro to the show, he's spoken candidly about his love for Porro, his love of Basuma. Well, let's see if he loves Basuma 2 weeks into the first training sessions.
When he gets off.
No disrespect to Biss, of course, but I just wonder, a lot of these players, that, like you said, he may keep an eye on, might like. I think it'll be very intriguing, as we know, Johnny, when we see those first few weeks of training and what Ange will make of them, because there will be players out there that we maybe think are done, and they may very well have a different pathway under him. This is the crazy thing about football and sport, about how one man's verdict and one man's judgment is so different to somebody else. How important is it for you that this club really now start to maybe accelerate into the market with Frank over these next couple of weeks and bring in players so we have them here for pre-season? Because I think what we all agree is the worst thing to be is having that situation where you're bringing players in on deadline day, they're having to adapt to a new manager, adapt to a new team, adapt to new surroundings, adapt to maybe expectation of playing for a club like Tottenham. In an ideal world, you would like to embed these players in early on to get an understanding and a grip of what for many is going to be a whole different philosophy in terms of how they've been playing, Johnny.
I think we need to look at, what Jim said before. I don't believe this is a rebuild. I think it's a rebalancing. Right now, we're talking about wingers. We've already got more wingers than Nando's. If you look at how many wingers that we have right now, we've got Yang, we've got Solomon, we've got Son, we've got Richarlison, we've got Odegaard, we've got Kulu. We got Johnson, we got Mikey Moore. There's a lot of what Brendan Johnson. There's a lot of wingers, and here we're talking about bringing in Brian Mbuemo. The thing I like about Brian Mbuemo is even though he plays on the flank, he's played as a centre forward. I think 6 times this season, scored 4 goals. He's played through the middle. He's played out wide. He offers us a lot. For me, though, I think if Spurs are going to show real intent, if this was a club that was going to show real intent right now, we have to upgrade. And what I mean by that is proper intent. That is making a bid for Eze, making a bid for Mbuemo, blowing comes out the water and buying ourselves a quality left back, whether that's left centre back to compete with Mickey van de Ven, whether that's Ndikia or Hincape. We need to make 3 statement signings. I don't want to see us making 5 20 million pound signings again. We need oven ready. We need players. We need to upgrade. I think we can all agree that maybe not everyone would agree that Brian Mbuemo is an upgrade on Brennan Johnson currently. I'm not saying that, when he gets into his head, he can make him a better player. I know Brennan Johnson scored, nearly as many goals, but the impact for 90 minutes, if you look at Brian Mbuemo's work rate, he works like a dog. He's unbelievable on the pitch. Someone like Eze, 0-0, low block, he's a guy that can just drop his shoulder and bang, bottom corner. We don't have really a player like that in our squad, I don't believe. And we need game changers. And he's of a level, when you look at him, when you look at Eze, you say Tottenham Hotspur, throwback player to Spurs players of old. And he's probably the one player in the Spurs fan base that if you put a poll out, he'd probably be the higher rated of the players to come to the club. I think the thing is also to bear in mind, if we buy Mbuemo or Semenyo, who I also like, tailed off a bit Semenyo towards the end of the season. In December and January, both of those will be going off to Africa for the African Nations Congress. So that will be like 6 weeks, more or less, out. We'll already be missing Papa Sarr, Basuma, if he stays, and Semenyo. And I think I might be wrong. It's either 1 or 2 Champions League games during that period. And as we know, a very busy league period. So we have to bear that in mind. I think I think now we need players now who are going to come in with some experience, who are going to take us into the Champions League. I'd be very interested to see how Thomas Frank sets up without the six. Well, I mean, we know that Ange wasn't a lover of a six. For me, I think behind every team is a monster six, unless you're Chelsea and you have like three of them. I feel like that's something that we are really missing.
Can I ask you, Johnny, just on the point you're mentioning, does it worry you personally that Frank hasn't had exposure to top-level European football? Do you think by the fact that he's managing the Premier League, he's managed it against some of the best teams, arguably say, let's be honest about it, in the world? I mean, I don't like praising Arsenal for just the fact I'm a Tottenham fan, but they did get far in the Champions League. You look at the teams that, Liverpool, for example, they're a very good side. These are teams that down the years, Frank has masterminded results against. So is it the be-all and end-all by the fact he hasn't managed at the top level of European football? I don't think it personally is a big problem for me. Is it a problem for you?
No, I think Thomas Frank isn't going to be getting much sleep come August, because knowing the type of person that he is, from what I've been told, he'll be studying every single team he's playing to the nth degree. He'll be looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, how to negate them, how to exploit their weaknesses, and he will try to set up a system. The issue here is, how long will it take the players to adapt to these systems? And these systems aren't just rigid systems for the game. These systems could easily change in-game when it's not working. You saw on the video before, how transitioning from 4 to 5, and if they lose the ball here, different formations and different setups, and that isn't going to take 5 minutes to learn. It's taken Brentford quite a while, but I think he has the tactical nous to not be naive in the games. I really don't think he will be naive.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I just want to touch on one point, Jim, to come over to you before we do go for the next break. Jim, I know you've been saying this a lot on Spurs, and when you've been on here as well, of the restrictions around this homegrown situation Tottenham face. I mean, is it something you can very quickly just kind of tell us about the concerns that may have for us in terms of those restrictions and how that may impact us this summer with regards to players coming in, players coming out, if you can?
Yeah, sure. And I've got a little spreadsheet here as well, going background. But and I'll give you the spreadsheet after this. You can pin it to the comments if it helps well. But it has all the kind of squad status effectively of where we are.
Yep.
And there is just a reality here that the squad is completely full. When you're looking at the homegrown quotas in UEFA, you're allowed 18 non-homegrown players. And even when we're talking about, ignoring the likes of Brian Hill and those other players that we consider, I don't like the term deadwood, I think it's a bit disrespectful, but you know what I mean? Those players we probably want to be moving on. We're still at maximum capacity. So we're going to have to make some decisions on it's going to be one in, one out. And when you look at the squad, which players you're going to move out. It'd be interesting to see if Dragason's a player that Frank gets more value in than what Ange did, because we're not flush with centre-backs, right? We are certainly not flush with quality centre-backs. We need to be careful how many of them we move on. But we've just extended Ben Davies. So it really is going to be one in, one out. And that's what I think Richarlison's going to be one where you go, we've got to maximise those non-homegrown spots with players who can be available, even though I think he's absolutely brilliant on his day. And you could never fault the guy's attitude. He's was key to that Europa League win. But I think you need to be quite brutal in this situation. Look at him, have that big question about Sonny. We know Forster's gone now. That's helpful. But there really isn't many spots because Forster was homegrown as well, wasn't he? So the big issue for us is our club-trained players, the players that have been registered at Spurs for 3 years. I believe it's before their 18th birthday. We've only got one currently in our squad. If you don't fill those spots, you're going in with a squad 3 players light. So this is where I think the Frank logic comes in of, what about Donnelly? What about these other players that have been in our academy a while? You don't have to make them superstars, but if you can make them competent, capable players in the right system where you don't expose their weaknesses too much, you can get a use out of them and leverage the fact you've got a deeper squad in these competitions that you will certainly need. So yeah, that is a key thing to look at. It is one in, one out from that perspective. And I do kind of feel like, I think Jonny and actually both said now, like now.
Kyle Walker-Peters, do you think, Jim?
Like he's another one that I think if you didn't have the homegrown and club grown issues, you would say no thanks. But given the context, you need to accept you can't get perfect, and he's better than what we have in the academy, and we've got the money to afford someone like that. Yeah. So it makes sense that you would go for a player like him completely. So I do agree. It's going to be interesting to watch for sure. But that's my summary of it. And like I said, I'm happy to give you a copy of what we've put together there if it's useful.
Jim, really appreciate that. Like I say, make sure you do go check out more on that on OSO Spurs. I know Jim will be doing a lot of stuff across the summer with regards to the issues that we are going to face in relation to homegrown signings we're going to make. I know Ash is going to provide loads of stuff also on Spurs Kings TV with regards to data analytics of players. Ash is only just starting, I can tell you on that for sure. And make sure, like I say, you are keeping an eye on Jonny, who will be at every home and away game. Where I hope for Johnny's sake as well, on the TikTok, on the Insta, when we get those post-match raw reactions from Jonny, wouldn't it be nice to see a smile? We're all waiting to see a smile, Jonny. We're all waiting. Listen, we're going to go for our final break of the show for our listeners on audio. Should we have a bit more of Thomas Frank? Let's have a bit more of Thomas Frank. We're going to go for our next break of the show. Let's hear more from Frank, who gave us a little bit of a snippet. And I will again remind you, go and check this out if you haven't already. It's a slight snippet from that, obviously, of course, podcast I was referring to, High Performers. Let's hear from Thomas Frank, and we're back after this. So there you go. Thomas Frank in action, very much, as we discussed, hands-on coach, tactically astute. There's excitement in the air. Because I think, for many out there that maybe have had some concerns over the direction Spurs have gone with regards to different coaches and different philosophies, I think what you do have with Frank, as we touched upon, a man that very much, as we've seen really throughout his time at Brentford, has been adaptable, has been flexible to change system in relation to the opposition that he's facing. And one thing I would say to you, if you're interested in going out there to have a look, and this is, I think, a really key thing, is that if you go and watch some of Thomas Frank's post-match press conferences after defeats, you see a man that actually explains to you, just on a logic basis, as to why his team have lost the game. There's no excuses. There's no hang-ups. There's no emotional reaction. It's just a man that purely is giving his verdict on why his team hasn't succeeded. And the greatest thing of all is he says, I just want to win. This is the man that wants to win. So I think it is going to be fascinating to see how it works. We've touched upon the recruitment aspect of how important that is going to be. And just to give everybody a bit of a summary of also some of the latest news we've heard, just some transfer links over the last 24 hours or so. Matisse Tell, at the moment, we understand, is expected to be remaining at the football club. Those Spurs are going to look to renegotiate that buy option on there. We know, I think at the time, Tottenham had an option of around 50 million. That is led to believe that will be negotiated in the coming weeks, and Spurs are expected to keep Tell. But you'd like to think maybe, if it's a possibility, Frank will have a chance to have a look at him. There's also been some interest in Jared Brandwaite of Everton. That, again, is one to potentially keep an eye on, a player that Tottenham have reportedly been eyeing up for quite a while. And the other that many might argue is a bit of a Tottenham name. Looks like a Tottenham player, maybe, I'm not sure. Jack Grealish, who has spent obviously a lot of time on the bench over the course of the last 12 months or so under Pep Guardiola. And despite signing or being triggered that option recently in terms of his contract, we understand Wrexham are still keen on Ben Davies. Wrexham would like to pay a modest transfer fee to land him this summer. So that could explain why Spurs have exercised their option. And a final one we've had in is regards to Heung-Min Son, who we understand has received an approach from Al Hilal's management in recent days. It's going to be a fascinating summer to come, because like we've touched upon, there's so many variables as to what certain players will do. One thing, guys, I want to maybe close on and ask you all is, what is, in your opinion, success for Thomas Frank in that first season? It's a difficult question. I know I'm asking this on the back of the previous manager to scoop in a European trophy, first one in 17 years. 40 years we had to wait for a European trophy. Shall I throw you in, Jonny, early, or
no, it's fine. Listen, look, I'll tell you what I look for, if I'm brutally honest. When I look at someone like Oliver Glasner, who's gone into Palace, and I look at someone like Mateta, who couldn't hit a barn door, and now he looks prolific, he's a monster. I look at Ismail Sarr, who had a great career and started going downwards, and he's coming to his game. I look at someone like, he's got rid of Anderson and he's brought in this Lacroix from Wolfsburg, and he's made him into a player, Manuz into a player. What I'm looking for, which I don't feel I saw other than Lucas Bergvall over his tenure, I'm looking for personal development in our players. I'm looking for our young players to show improvement, to show they're up in their game, to be better than they are. I've got no doubts about Mikey Moore. I'm talking about more maybe Brendan Johnson, Archie Gray, Bergvall, who I think has got natural progression in him. But, I think this is the manager that the club has been craving personally. And I think for me, if we can do this, and if he can do this, and I believe he can with his team, the rest will naturally come, Ricky. I think the results will come, the belief will come, and hopefully we can maintain some sort of challenge. And to be honest with you, for a successful season, I think, a nice run, in the Champions League. And should we finish outside the top 5 and we finish 6th, no problem. We'll go again. We'll go in the Europa League and we'll win it again.
Ash, you mentioned earlier about that link, that Scandinavian link that he had with someone like Lucas Bergvall. How important is that? Because I think we've all been so delighted to see Bergvall's progress. And I think, I was saying a lot of the shows that we did last season, those defeats that, we're not getting the best out of it. But in a weird way, the players that are going through that defeat after defeat after defeat, they are, becoming conditioned to not only losing, but going through tough times. And we do know through tough times is growth, is progression, is a real hardened. And the matter of fact, these guys now, this is really important I say this, these guys are winners. It's a different beast to a lot of different managers that have come into Tottenham and picked up a squad. They're not picking up a squad that is, very much, had very little success. These guys have just come off the back of winning a European trophy. And I think the one thing that I'm so grateful for Ange for is helping these guys get over the line for that trophy, because I really want to hope now that these guys are hungry for more success. And I think it's really important what Jim said in that intro parts of the show. This shouldn't be a rebuild. It shouldn't be a reset, despite me joking around saying that. This should be, I think, as Johnny used that word, a bit of a rebalance, right? It's an opportunity to steer some of these players onto the right path where they're going wrong. And really, as Johnny said, coach and develop them over time, where there's so much potential in this squad. We've said that, yes, it needs additions. Yes, it needs more experience. It needs a higher caliber of players coming in. But there are some really good foundations there, Ash, that we can definitely, hopefully, propel, right? I mean, what do you feel for you would be success this upcoming season?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the show, I said Ange walked so Thomas could run, but I said it I said it in jest. But what I meant was, like you guys said already, it's a continuation. It's not a rebuild. And I think with Bergvall playing with Bentancur last season, I think he will help to develop him even further, Bentancur. And in the system that Frank's going to deploy, I would think he'd really start to move towards a double pivot a lot more. So rather than having a lone six, you're going to have a player playing alongside you. And I think that will help bring out the best in Bergvall. Also, we are looking to strengthen in that area from what reports I've read. So anyone coming in will either be competition for a player like Bergvall, which will boost him up, or another experienced player who he can learn off. So either way, for me, it should be a win-win for a player like Lucas Bergvall and his development. In terms of where I see us, next season, I don't have a massive expectation. Some people think, he has to have a massive cup run, or he has to win a cup in his first season. I don't think that's realistic. Top 6, I don't even think that's realistic, if I'm being totally honest. But he has got to get us into the top half of the table, in my opinion. And I think I would prefer if he did start slow and then finish strong. I would see that more of a progression, and I'd be more excited about that as opposed to starting fast
100%.
and then tailing off, if that makes sense.
That's an important point.
So,
Yeah.
so that's the parameters. And, you know, like, it is a big club, so there's going to be a lot of pressure. And how does he navigate the two games a week and kind of maintain a level for the club where he's performing in that league form and fans are getting behind him? But players like links, like what we've heard with Bramthwaite, other centre backs like NDK, like Johnny said before, and even the usage of Dragushin as a centre back. I feel like when I was watching Brentford, they deploy their centre backs to be a lot more direct. So before, we used to lose a lot of short passing. Now these defenders here, they like to play long balls into the forward players, and that's the reason why we are probably linked to Nathan Collins, because he's a good passer of the ball. He's someone that can find those balls over the top, find the wide players, and he got 2 goals last season and 5 assists. Now, for me, that's not a coincidence. That means that, yes, Thomas can play out from the back with his defenders, but he's not afraid to go long. And that's the reason why he scored within that first minute 3 times in a row in the league, which was a record.
Yeah.
And the central defenders are pivotal to that. And Collins was the right-sided defender. And it's a bit like, for Spurs fans listening and watching right now live, it's a bit like Toby. When Toby under Poch had the ball, he would pick that ball up, get his head up, and he'd make a diag ping right into Dele Alli. And I can imagine Maddison making that run into the box, you know, and getting onto something. So I'm seeing things like that. And even when he had the 2 centre-backs split, remember when he used to get Eric Dyer as a defensive midfielder to play as a half-back or a quarterback? That's what Thomas Frank does with players like Janssen and other midfield pivots. He sometimes drops him into left-back or drops them into the midfield in between the 2 centre-backs, creating a back 3. And that's how he plays out from the back. So the tactical flexibility is something that us Spurs fans are quite used to. And it is reminiscent of Poch, which gives me good vibes, positive vibes, things I can kind of hold on to. Do you know what I mean? So there's loads of things that I draw for. But the last thing I would say is, I know a lot of people are saying Jack Grealish is washed. You know, they don't really rate him, whatnot. I personally think at Man City, I'm not sure if that was the right development for him. He was played out wide, in my opinion. I like to see Jack Grealish thriving centrally. He can play in the 10, in my opinion.
Can that work with Maddison in the same team, Ash? Do you think you can have 2 players of that nature?
It's similar to Eze. Eze plays out wide, but he drifts into central positions. So if Grealish was to start out wide and then he drifted centrally, then that would allow Maddison to peel off wide, which we have seen this last season. We have seen Maddison out wide, picking up the ball in midfield and then rotating. And with Thomas Frank, he does like his midfielders to do rotations. They're not fixated. They still have freedom in the system. So I think the IQ between Maddison, between Grealish or even an Eze, that would be fine. They would know when to hold on to the ball, when to release it, when to let go, when to carry it, when to dribble, when to drop the shoulder, because that's what they're really good at. And they're really good at unlocking those defenses, and they're also good in transition. So when you look at the profile of the players on that left-hand side, Spurs typically build up from the left-hand side. That's where we create our most chances. That's when we build up from the back, from the left. And when you've got players that are good on the ball, good physical attributes, because that's one thing we're missing from our wide players, physicality, in my opinion. A playmaker on the left, I feel, will give us attack another dimension, because normally our wingers, they're just going on the outside or they go on the inside. But in terms of passing in between the lines, in terms of the skies in the pass, reverse passes, through balls, you're going to get a lot more from your wide players if they've got that vision with their head up and are able to pick up players.
That's why Eze, Ash, for me, you know, what worries me is that Maddison, you're only going to get 40% of him in a season. You know, I don't think he's definitely not got more than 40% of the games with the Champions League and the Premier League. So therefore, if you lose him, we know Kulu's out probably till February. We need some creativity. We need somebody opens the doors. And that's why, for me, if we're going to get Grealish, I'm happy to get Grealish on a loan, because he's desperate to get back into the World Cup squad. So this would give him, an avenue to do that. But for me, for long term, it's Eze all day long, because he's exactly the guy that we need. He's Spurs. I can just close my eyes and see him in a Spurs shirt drifting inside. And let me tell you something: when he drifts inside, right, you ain't getting the ball off of him. He answers for me. He answers everything that we really need up front to unlock the door.
You know, I want to ask Jim to close on that. And it's been such a great show. I've got to say, it's so nice to be able to be so ultra positive. I think even for, again, hosting this show for the last 7-8 years, and the last 18 months have been really tricky, and we've not had the chance to all come together and be really buoyant about the future. And I will say this, that's not to do down Andrew's time here. He gave me, as I said, the best moment supporting this club of my lifetime. That week we had with the final and the parade, that's why I'll always be indebted. And I will thank that man for giving us such a special week as Tottenham fans. But many will understand we have to move on. And, moving on means Thomas Frank. And just on that point, Jim, what's really important, again, this is maybe what's saying that Ange, maybe you'd argue, maybe struggled with. Coming to a club like Tottenham, there's a lot more expectation, both on performances in terms of winning, and then obviously the nature of losing as well. There's a lot more spotlight. There's a lot more attention. How much, Jim, do you think that's going to be something that he's going to have to get used to? Because even, I was speaking to a lot of the guys, even on the press roundup, the press circuit, with all due respect to Thomas, he's used to having, 10, 15 people in a room. You go to Tottenham Hotspur way, you've got a full... It's going to be a massive, massive press conference in that first one. There's going to be a lot of people there for Thomas that are going to ask him, like Ange got a lot of the same questions week after week. How is Thomas going to, do you feel, adapt to that difference in terms of going from Brentford to a club like Tottenham? I mean that in no disrespect at all to Brentford, Jim.
Yeah, it's going to be a new experience for him, but I don't think we should look at new experiences as, I think we can overly value past experiences in what managers and players have done and say, oh, well, I want to see someone who's seen this before or done this before. A lot of these elite coaches have hit the ground running when a new challenge has been put in front of them for the first time. And I think Frank he'll be mulling over what are the main challenges and hurdles he's going to face for the first time, and he will have a plan for those things. And those plans will work out for some of those challenges, and other ones he will take a step back, reevaluate what his plan was, but he will get there. And I think an advantage Frank is going to have is, I feel, the vast majority of the fan base understand why we've made this appointment, and they will see it. And we've heard it from the expectations of everyone on this show tonight, right? And in the comments, most people are for the first time not saying top four on a trophy as a 1 year expectation. They're saying top half, continuation, building upon where the clear gaps were in the previous seasons in the squad, and building up and continuing this project. So I think we've got a 1 year expectation that's going to be much more measured. But I think as time goes on, the expectations from the fan base will rise, which is completely understandable. And after year two, some people will have differing opinions on where we should be, but we need to hold steadfast here, because we've seen it with what's happened with other managers. In order for Spurs to break the mold and to truly go on a title challenge again, whether it was Poch doing that, whether it was Klopp resurging Liverpool, whether it was the unmentionable neighbour down the road, they all needed that third year to really get to that point. And I think you've got to give Frank the same opportunity and respect to do that. And he will make us wobble. He will have times where you go 5 or 6 games without a win and you'll go, oh, actually, I'm starting to doubt him. But you need to remember that this is normal in football. Like even the Man Cities we saw last year of Pep have these lower bouts of form. As long as I'm seeing that the squad is becoming more balanced, as we continuously say, consistently good transfer strategies underpin the success of any coach. And I feel like we're moving in that direction. And Frank is the right man to have a patient 2 to 3 year plan to get us there. So he will, though, have to face in the media new forms of scrutiny. They start when you manage Brentford, it's that adorable Brentford. Look at this guy doing a great job over there.
So true.
He's no threat to Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher in the studio because he's not taking on their football clubs for a trophy that they support quite openly. He's not. So that will change. And if he's doing a good job, take it as a good thing. If they start coming after him, knives out at every opportunity they can, that's probably a reason why that they are feeling that we're building something to have their clubs slightly concerned. Whereas if they continuously belittle him for kind of being like, I really enjoy that he doesn't know what he's doing in these big games, but I love seeing someone trying to punch up like that. Like, this guy is on our side. And what I liked is the way he waited for the opportunity to manage Spurs. Klopp had it as well, which I liked about Klopp, even though he was difficult from a neutral's perspective to get behind in the media sometimes. He's the guy who punches up. Those kind of managers who are like, I fancy being a part of that big six, but I fancy being on the smaller side of that and trying to take a club to take down that dynasty of Man City. You know what I mean? If he can get over a 4 or 5 year period of Spurs and stay with us that long and take us on a couple of seasons of a true title challenge, I'd say we've made the right appointment, and we know we have. But he's going to need 2 or 3 years to build that and get us there. So my expectation in the first year is nothing more than closing some of those gaps in the squad, top half finish, showing the tactical nous to go across multiple competitions. And most importantly, when he makes mistakes, we see him learning from them.
So true. I mean, that's so true. Listen, I will just close if I can. I'll go around to everybody with a quote from Pep Guardiola. I know, look, Pep said some lovely things about Ange, it's fair to say as well, but he's also said some lovely things about Thomas Frank. You know, he said it's just a question of time before Thomas Frank joins a big European club. He will get it. They will get a good manager, and that is going to happen. I'm in a good few things, but really when a manager is good, I know when one is, and Thomas is one of those. So look, I think bar all us here, we wish Thomas all the very, very best of luck. I think the majority of the fan base will definitely get behind him. I do appreciate for some out there, they are mourning Ange Postecoglou. I know there's some that wouldn't have made the change. There's some that wouldn't have liked the change. But I think there comes a time where, like, for everybody, you've got to get behind the new man because he's going to need the support of everybody. And I know the stadium fans that go week in, week out to Tottenham that come on the show, that I always say this show for me represents a lot of people that are on those terraces. I know will get behind the manager, will get behind what is a Europa League winning team. And I think hopefully this is a real, real exciting appointment for the future. Anything you want to say, John, before we close?
Listen, I think Jim's right. I mean, dare I say it? I haven't said it since he was there, but there was something about Pochettino when he was at Southampton that really excited me. And, I said to my son, I'd love to have him at Spurs. And I said the same thing about Frank, but I never thought it would happen. So, he gives me vibes, positive vibes that this could be a manager that can survive longer than the 2 years and maybe start to build something. And hopefully with the boardroom changes that are coming here, a more positive attitude to transfers, fan liaison and the rest of it with Vinay and Charrington, that this is the start of a journey northwards for the club. After all, you can't get much lower than 17th. So I look forward to the journey north.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen, Johnny, you can't thank you enough. Love to have you back on the wonderful Jonny Hamme. Make sure you're checking him out on, obviously, Insta, Johnny H3232, Football Link. We've got TikTok as well. Do we get Johnny raw in pre-season, Johnny, or are you going to have a little bit of time before we get you back raw in the Premier League? What are we going to get?
Listen, I look forward to coming back. Listen, Football Link, which I've started with Sean. That's on our YouTube channel, and basically that's all things football. So if you get a chance, go and sub to us. And listen, it's been a pleasure to be on. It's been a great panel tonight with Jim and Ash. Nice conversation. Nothing
Been
too
good, it's been
emotional.
Been
All
good.
positive. All positive. What's going on?
I don't know, but something better not happen now to ruin it because we're having a bloody good time at the moment. Johnny, we look forward to seeing you, mate, throughout the summer. You'll be with us on here, of course. Ash, thank you so much. I know it's been we're putting you through the ringer on Ash, but we're loving having you on. And I know it's going to be a big period for us all here on Last Word on Spurs. Fair to say there's a lot to come, right, Ash, in these next few weeks.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. Thanks for having me on again. Big up to Jim and Johnny and yourself and people listening and watching. Thanks for the support. And like, just to finish on Thomas Frank, I just personally think we said it on the show already that we've gone from one extreme to ultra defensive to the other extreme, ultra attacking.
Yep.
And I feel like he might be the balance.
The balance. Yeah.
That we all need and crave.
Goldilocks is porridge.
On that note,
that's the headline of the show. Ash, you're a star. Like I say, lots of stuff over at Spurs Kings TV. Ash, mention anything exciting coming up your way? I know you're going to probably do a lot of player analysis, right? Is it fair to say, Ash, in these next few weeks, there's going to be a lot coming your way on Spurs Kings TV, right?
Yeah. As always, we look at the details. We go in. We try to look at what the narrative is and try to rip it apart. But yeah, just literally join in and look out for us, man. Hit the notification button. But yeah, make sure you like and subscribe to this wonderful channel as well, man.
Bless you. Ash, wonderful Spurs Kings TV. Please go and check them out. And please also go and check out the wonderful Jim at Oso Spurs. Those guys have also put some magnificent content out. And I've got to say, it's been an absolute pleasure having Jim on in these last few weeks. I don't want to make, because Jim's not met him yet, but many are telling me Jim is a young Jason McGovern. Johnny's not had the pleasure of being on the show yet with Jason. I think he did see him at one of the protests last season, but Ash knows Jason. I'm not sure whether Jason will be horrified that I'm making an assumption that there's a younger, better-looking version of him with hair that finds his way. But we're really enjoying Jim's input on Last Word on Spurs. We're looking forward to more of it to come. Jim, anything you want to give a mention to on what's going on with regards to Oso Spurs? You've always got loads of stuff going on there. Want to give a mention to anything in particular?
I've got 2 videos scheduled that recorded tonight. So we've got we recorded a video alongside a qualified licensed coach who's worked with other Premier League managers, and they gave their view on how we will set up under Frank, and a lot of it was discussed obviously by Johnny and Ash as well, because they know their stuff in that area. So but yeah, there's a deep dive into that if you're interested in that kind of thing. And then the normal pod episode as well is just coming out. And yeah, I've just started like doing the Instagram and TikTok thing as well. So any support getting that off the ground, as I've started a bit late on those ones.
Don't worry, Jim. We're all trying to get there. We've only just got one pair of hands. That's our bloody problem.
That's the problem, yeah.
Like I say, make sure you go and check out more from Jim at Oso Spurs. Loads of content coming your way. But there you go. The next time we may be with you, Tottenham may have a new head coach in Thomas Frank. Let's hear finally one more time what he said about some of his incoming players, or for him, incoming squad he's going to manage. We're going to hear from Thomas Frank to close the show. Listen, guys, thank you so much for all your support. Over 12,500 of you watching the show live. Thank you ever so much. Keep liking, keep subscribing. Let's hear out Thomas Frank on what he makes of some Tottenham squad.
I think that's a big expectation. I know they haven't had the best season, but if you look at their lineup, just take their front three, I think a lot of clubs would have taken them any day. I know more play there could be Kulusevski, but let's say their midfield, Kulusevski, Bentancur, Bissouma, that's a very, 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 very good Premier League midfield. And then I know they haven't had a centre-back, but maybe Gray and Ben Davies played the best defensive game of the season. So Porro is fantastic as right-back. He's got Trent-ish offensive qualities, and Spence have done very well, Kingsley. So we can't expect. If we expect that, then there's something wrong with our fans, or something wrong with in the Premier League. It's difficult every game.
There you go. Thomas Frank in action. We'll be back with you very, very soon. From Jim, from Johnny, from Ash, from me. We've been the Last Word on Spurs. Keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on you Spurs.
Come on, you